Welcome to Tide and Tigers. Scott Griffin and Rodney of Tider Insider. We got a little recruiting, a little Arkansas update for you today. I know you've been working the phones hard and checking all the sources and different things. Rodney of course, the first and foremost expert on Bama recruiting. What have you unearthed today? We got more than one guy, or what's going on?
Well, a lot of talk about recruiting. It's going to start heating up, signing day being in December, the early signing period. So certainly things are going to start picking up really soon, Scott. After the weekend, there was a lot of talk out of Texas about a couple of guys. Alabama's been recruiting extremely hard. Obviously, Vernon Jackson out of Bowling, Texas, linebacker / H-back type guy, athlete, who is committed to Alabama. And also Bobby Brown, maybe Alabama's top a defensive line target in the high school ranks out of Arlington, Lamar, Texas. Both those guys, I think they were in College Station. A lot of chatter anyway that maybe Texas A&M is moving in on both of those guys. But we talked to some people that kind of reconfirmed that Alabama's still in very, very good position with both of those players. Again, you know how recruiting works. A lot of things can change. But as of right now, the rumors about, Vernon Jackson, Bobby Brown, Maybe a little premature right now in terms of Texas A&M. On the quarterback recruiting front, there was a story that broke earlier this week. It was mistakenly posted, in all fairness, that Jaron Williams, quarterback out of Lawrenceville, Georgia, had switched his commitment from Kentucky to Alabama. That's not true. He is certainly very interested in Alabama, as is Emory Jones, who at Franklin Herd County over in Georgia. Those are the two guys, when Alabama fans start talking about which quarterbacks should we keep an eye on. Those are the two, Scott. I think it'll be either one of those two guys because they do plan to sign a guy in the 2018 class. You remember it wasn't long ago that Asa Martin out of Decatur, Austin, committed to Auburn, really versatile, all-around back, having a tremendous senior year. He is supposedly going to visit here Tuscaloosa for the Tennessee game. Now, there's no indication that he's considering a flip to Alabama. There's no indication that his commitment to Auburn's not solid, but it is interesting nonetheless that he is going to take a visit. Now, we told you a few weeks ago a running back to keep a close eye on out of the state of Florida was Chris Curry, committed to LSU. We still think, Scott, that he's a guy to keep a very, very close eye on, 5'11", 205 pounds, and I think the Alabama coaching staff likes him quite a bit. So that's another running back I think Alabama fans should keep an eye on. As far as tight end recruiting, Dominic Wood Anderson, maybe the number one tight end in all of JUCO ranks, certainly a very, very gifted player, committed to Texas, if you remember back in the summer, kind of surprisingly. Everybody thought maybe he was coming to Alabama. Well, he's still in the mix with Alabama. We'll see what happens. Assistant Tosh Lapoy, Alabama assistant Tosh Lapoy, was over at Arizona Western last week and checking up on Dominic Wood Anderson, and I think he still certainly has some interest. We'll see how that shakes out. Glenn Beal is another tight end out of River Ridge, which is, of course, the New Orleans area. John Curtis High School, 6'5", 250. He's another tight end. He's committed to LSU that's looking at Alabama. I would keep an eye on him. Some of the top defenders that are slated for visits upcoming, Scott. J.J. Peterson, one of the top 2018 linebackers out of Moultrie, Colquitt County, plays for Rush Probst, as you remember, the former Hoover coach. Scott, this guy may be the best linebacker in the country. 6'2", 220, very athletic. A guy that's so athletic he returned a kickoff 99 yards for a touchdown last year. So this guy's outstanding athletically. Ayabi Anoma, he may be the best pass rusher in the country. 6'5", 235, 240 out of Baltimore St. Francis. Alabama and Michigan are considered the top two for him. He's supposed to come in on a visit for the LSU game on November the 4th. Visits Michigan on November the 25th. Alabama coaches are supposed to check up on him next week up there in Baltimore. A guy that a lot of people haven't mentioned coming in on a visit, Cleveland Heights, Ohio, defensive end, Tariq Smith, 6'3", 260, has close to 40 offers. Now, Ohio State's generally difficult to beat for guys in that state.
Although Ryan Kelly and Trey DePriest came to Alabama.
Well, and part of that was because Ohio State kind of slow-played those guys and allowed Alabama an opportunity to get in and get a foothold. But Alabama, Ohio State, Oregon, Penn State are among his top schools. We'll see what happens there. One note of in-state interest, a lot of people wondering what Jackson Olin defensive lineman Connis Miller will do when he announces his decision on Saturday. I think everybody around here expects him to go to Auburn. That's the feeling. So it would be a surprise if he does not end up at Auburn.
There has been talk that with the defensive line success at Alabama, now certainly there's been at Auburn in the last couple of years, but at Alabama that he could do a Deron Payne kind of decision. You remember Deron was an Auburn fan, made a business decision to go to Alabama. Is that possible at all from your sources?
No, I don't think so. I think actually it's almost the reverse. Connis Miller's been a long-time Alabama fan, and I think part of it is because at that school, T.D. Moultrie, who is now at Auburn, a linebacker, outstanding player, he's now at Auburn, as you know, and I think that's part of it. And I think there's a heavy Auburn influence there, so it may make it very difficult for Alabama with Connis Miller. I do expect him to go to Auburn.
What is the latest on Harold Joyner? He intrigues me because he's so athletic, as you know, the running back, but really he can be an outside backer, a wide receiver, a safety, and probably be really good at all. He's the kid from Mountain Brook. Do we know anything on him?
Well, I think with him, like you said, he's very versatile. And right now, as it relates to Alabama, I'm not really sure what's going to happen with him. I'm not sure where he would fit in. You know, numbers are getting real tight, Scott. They've got to get defensive linemen. They've got to get several defensive backs. So those are the priorities. They've got another offensive lineman or two that they're looking at. Wide receiver or two, certainly, that they're looking at. Jalen Waddle out of Texas would be one of those guys, which I feel Alabama's in great shape with him. Maybe the number one wide receiver type player in the country, Scott. He can do so many things. Justin Ross at Phoenix City Central and other guys. So there are still a lot of guys on the board. Where Harold Joyner would fit in right now is hard to say.
Now, Miles Mason was a guy that was at Pleasant Grove, really good safety, could play wide receiver, but I really think his future is at safety. He has played some with Hewitt-Trussville as he transferred there. He's had a little knee issue the last couple of weeks, but it's something minor. What do we know about him? Because I think he's a pretty good player.
Well, he is a really good player. And, again, whether he ends up here at Alabama or not, I would think not right now. And that's not anything against him as a player. And things can change. You know, you never know how the evaluation process will go between now and whenever he signs, whether it's in the early signing period, late signing period, which I'm not sure which one he's going to do or wants to do. But right now I would think he'd probably end up elsewhere.
Now, Alabama is always good at looking ahead. Let's go to 2019. Pierce Quick leads that class. Paul Tyson also at Trussville. Just off the top of your head, how is Alabama looking, you know, as far as even a year from now?
Well, you know, again, there's things change in the 2018 class rapidly, Scott. So imagine how quickly things could change in the 2019 class. I mean, these guys, they change their minds so quickly. Alabama does have, by the way, one of the top 2 or 3 running backs in the country committed, Trey Sanders, who had been at IMG Academy. So they're off to a really good start. They've got him. They've got De'Yavi Hamilton, another big offensive lineman, and probably an interior player. They've got him committed. And I know that they're off to a good start in terms of not only a few early commitments, but also, Scott, with some guys that they're in good position with early. Clay Webb, who's one of the top offensive linemen in the state out of Oxford, and also Amari Kite, who is out of the Thompson team that's so highly touted, as we know, as they're rolling along with Tulia. Is that how you say it?
Tulia Tagovailoa, who is throwing for about 350 a game.
It's just a tongue twister.
Yeah.
But, we just call him Little Tags on Tighter Insider. But so Little Tags is lighting it up. But Amari Kite is a offensive tackle on that team that's going to be really, really good and guy to watch.
I should say it's a tongue twister instead of a tongue twister. Yes, Tagovailoa. So what do you think of him? I mean, he's a guy, we see his brother. We're in love with his brother. Tulua is a little shorter, but throws a great ball, spins it terrifically, very confident back there, has a lot of qualities Tua does. What do you think of him?
Well, you know, one thing about him is when you talk to a lot of people, they think that he's actually even better than Tua. Now, again, you know how you hear all those comparisons and that type of thing to all the sometimes when you have a younger brother, but, you know, from what we hear and from what we see, I mean, he certainly is the real deal. Now, he's not real tall, probably 5'11". That's what he measured at Alabama, 5'11", 199. So, but certainly an outstanding prospect. And, Scott, I don't remember what I said on Diaby. It's Diaby Hammond, who is committed to Alabama. Pierce Quick, those are two offensive linemen for the 2019 class, and Trey Sanders, the running back, as I mentioned earlier.
All right, but certainly Pierce Quick is one of those that has been a lot like some Bama players from the past that helps recruit other players, and I know Pierce Quick was heavily involved with Asa Martin, trying to get him down here before Asa committed to Auburn. But as you said, that's likely not over.
And another 2019 prospect that will be here this weekend, one of the elite players in the state of Georgia's 2019 class, will be highly recruited nationally. I think he commits to Alabama in December. I'm talking about a little over, about 2 months from now, is King Makuta, a linebacker, 6'4", 220. He will be here in Tuscaloosa for the Arkansas game this weekend, and I think he commits to Alabama in December.
But not this weekend.
No, not this weekend. I think he's going to make his decision in December, and I think he picks Alabama. Now, again, things can change. It's a long way off, but I certainly think when he announces in December, it's a good chance it's going to be Alabama.
What about Justin Fields? His dad loved Alabama. He picks Georgia. Not a surprise. His sister plays softball there. Dual threat quarterback, number one in America. Be a nice player to have. How much does it hurt Alabama not to get him? And the fact that he goes to Georgia. And is there any chance of that? Because his dad was very impressed with Alabama.
Well, I think, to me, he's got a sister going there. I know may even have more than one sibling going to Georgia, so it's not really a surprise. I thought, to be honest with you, that his visit here was just a visit. I never really thought he was that serious about it, but you never know what can happen. Again, right now, Kirby Smart's doing a good job of locking down a lot of those players in the state of Georgia, so it's going to make it more and more difficult.
What about LSU? A lot depends on this weekend taking on Auburn. That was the whole mantra of Ed Orgeron, to close down the walls of the state. It's not working. Didn't work with Christopher Allen or Dylan Moses. Where are we at with that state?
Well, that's a good question. I think it remains to be seen. And, they have some prospects that are committed to them that I know Alabama's certainly looking at. I mentioned Glenn Beal, the tight end. Kelvin Joseph was committed to them, a defensive back out of Baton Rouge, who now has kind of reopened things. And, we'll see what happens there. I mentioned Chris Curry, the running back out of Florida that's committed to LSU. As you know, Nadab Joseph, a defensive back out of Hialeah, Florida, was committed to LSU. These guys are starting to look around, obviously looking around. I think Nadab Joseph will probably make a decision fairly soon and release his commitment. Alabama seems to be the team, has been. And, we'll see how it all unfolds. But LSU's in trouble recruiting-wise right now. I mean, if they were to not finish the season strong, I mean, it could create some issues with their recruiting.
I think it's a key game Saturday with Auburn, don't you?
I really do.
For that reason.
I do think every game right now is big for LSU in terms of perception. They got wiped out in their state last year. Alabama took 6 of their top players. And, I mean, great players. We see a lot of those guys contributing. Dylan Moses, Chris Allen, Devontae Smith. I mean, Isaiah Buggs is a guy that is a native of Louisiana, was a junior college player in Mississippi that everyone thought was going to LSU. So Alabama basically wiped out a big portion of LSU's recruiting class last year. And so as you look at this year, it could happen where Alabama takes a couple of guys. I mean, if they were to take Kelvin Joseph and Chris Curry, those would be blows to LSU. We'll see what happens. But, again, you ask if this was a big game. I think every game's big for LSU right now from a perception standpoint.
All right, let's talk a little bit about Arkansas coming in. What are you looking for? We say every week just improve play. But last week with Texas A&M, it was kind of perfect for Nick Saban because they won the game and he was able to harp on stuff, and he has this week at practice.
Yeah, and I think one thing too. I think one of the lessons to learn, Scott, is with 6 minutes left in the third quarter, you're in control of the game. I mean, it's 24-3. It's not a blowout, but you're handling that game. There's no doubt. Alabama's got a very good grip on that game, and then you see how quickly it can turn. You fumble the ball. Texas A&M gets it, converts 2 fourth downs, scores. All of a sudden, a 24-3 game turns into 24-10, and the momentum switches. The crowd gets in the game, and all of a sudden you're on your heels. So I think that's one thing that they can really learn from, and so certainly that was a game I was a little wary of because of just that scenario. I mean, you're going on the road. You've had 2 impressive wins like they had in terms of 59-0, 66-3. Everybody's singing your praises. That's hard to ignore. It's rat poison. You can't listen to it. But those types of things are hard not to listen to. It's hard to avoid. So I think that was a difficult situation going into Texas A&M. Now this week, it's kind of shifted a little bit. I think they've got the attention, so to speak, of the players. I think it's easier to get the attention in a situation like this. And Arkansas is struggling. They're 2-3. Let's be honest. They're not a very good football team right now. But they're not necessarily a bad team either. I mean, they actually almost beat Texas A&M. It was an overtime game, 50-43. It was a real shootout. Austin Allen, I think he's going to play. It seems like he's going to play. They may play both those guys. Yeah. The backup quarterback, Cole Kelly, 6'7", 270, and he's supposedly a runner. That was interesting, but he's doing a nice job passing. He was 7 of 13, I think, in the last game against South Carolina for 140 yards. But Austin Allen's a guy threw for 3,400 yards last year, Scott. He's a guy that lit up Alabama's secondary, if you remember, in Fayetteville. They scored 30 points on that great defense. I know you remember that. And Alabama had a hard time, as I recall, stopping him on third down. He had completed several third down passes. But anyway, long story short, it depends on whether or not he plays. But again, it seems like he will. I picked it 52-7 on Tider Insider TV because I when you look at it, I just think Arkansas comes in a little bit of a reeling football team.
ESPN had a midseason All-American list. Bradley Bozeman made it. Minka Fitzpatrick made it. I bring up Bradley Bozeman because now his backup, Brady Kennedy, hurts himself, has to have some surgery. I thought he has progressed nicely. Where's Alabama if something happens to Bozeman? We saw Bozeman twice come in for Ryan Kelly on injuries in key games. So we always talk about your play away in the quarterback position, your play away at a key position like center.
Yeah. Well, right now, J.C. Hassenauer was working with the second group yesterday. Hassenauer, of course, is a senior. He's been around a while. He's played. He's worked at guard as well, but he came here as a center, a pure center. And a lot of people thought at the time he came in that he was the heir apparent to Ryan Kelly. But, again, it ended up, as you know, Bradley Bozeman. So Hassenauer's been working that spot. Josh Casher has worked at center in the past. They could work other guys there as well. Chris Owens, the redshirt freshman out of Arlington, Lamar, Texas, he's worked at center a lot. So those guys would probably be the most likely scenario at this point in terms of the guys that would likely get backup opportunities. Certainly we hope that doesn't happen. But as you know, Bradley Bozeman last week played a little bit banged up. So, you hope that he can stay healthy.
A couple of things are enigmas right now. Najee Harris, Josh Jacobs, not much time at all against Texas A&M. Najee Harris doesn't surprise me. The Josh Jacobs does because he was going to be the changeup, if we put it in baseball vernacular, catching passes and doing things. What's going on with that from your perspective?
Well, the week before against Ole Miss, he was involved. He had the touchdown reception, had another big play, had a 40-plus yard run. I think what happened at Texas A&M was they were pretty conservative. They didn't ask a lot out of Jalen Hurts. They did not utilize the versatility of some of these players. It was mainly running of Damian Harris and Bo Scarborough. So they really didn't seem to do a lot of different things offensively. They didn't do some of the things that we saw earlier against Vanderbilt and then more so even against Ole Miss. We didn't see that. I know Nick Saban made it a point last night to say that they intended to get Josh Jacobs and Najee Harris involved again. So I would think this week against Arkansas, we'll see more of those guys.
Tight ends. Hale Hinges still, I think, with 2 catches, both for touchdowns. I thought I would see Irv Smith more involved in it, in the catching aspect of it. We haven't seen that either, even with Miller Forrester out with the injury. What's the thinking there?
Yeah, well, he did catch a little flare pass against Texas A&M. Irv Smith did. But what we haven't really seen is finding Irv Smith or finding the tight ends down the field in the passing game. We saw some of it, if you remember, in A-Day. We saw the tight ends getting down the field. We saw them delivering throws. We haven't seen that yet.
Hitting the seams is what we What the Patriots do with Gronk, and we expected that.
We expected that. Now, again, not as sure exactly why. I'm not sure if the reads have progressed that far or exactly what has happened. Protection is broken down on the plays, that maybe those opportunities might have been there or could have been there potentially. But I do think that if you can get the tight ends involved down the field and start spreading the ball to other guys, that this Alabama offense has the potential to be virtually unstoppable, Scott. I really believe that if they can spread the field throwing the football, that you're not going to be able to stop the running game. It's going to be difficult.
Alabama number 1 in the SEC total offense and running the football. Defensively, Anthony Jennings has come back from surgery. Terrific. 11 quarterback hurries since he's been back. I think the other defensive line is fed off that. Jeremy Pruitt's still a blitzing guy. He's going to blitz 50% of the time, but it's really nice, as you know, when you can get some funk on the quarterback without having to blitz to do it.
Well, Anthony Jennings, you mentioned it. He certainly, since he's come back, you can see a big difference. I mean, just a sophomore, played last year as a redshirt freshman, so he's a guy that I really like, Anthony Jennings. He's made a difference as a pass rusher. We saw the hit he put on Kellen Mond. That was very close. They called his arm forward. I thought that was really close. But anyway, regardless, he has certainly done an outstanding job. But I really like, too, Scott, when you look at the defensive line, you've got to credit Carl Dunbar. I mean, what a job he has done in terms of developing some of these guys. We talked about last spring on your radio show, we talked about the development of Isaiah Buggs, a junior college defensive lineman, what kind of an impact he could make. And if you watched him, he had 10 tackles in this game. He was a dominant football player in this particular game. They couldn't block him. Raekwon Davis, wow. I mean, how good does he look? You see the improvement there. Quinnen Williams, LaBryan Ray. Quinnen Williams, a redshirt freshman. LaBryan Ray, a true freshman. Both those guys got sacks, and I'm talking about crucial sacks, at very important points of the game. Those two guys were very impressive. We know about Deron Payne. He's certainly been that guy for 3 years since he's been here. And also Josh Frazier. I think Josh Frazier's played really, really well. So I like what I see from some of these young Alabama defensive linemen and how they're developing.
Finally, the field goal kicking, we haven't talked about it. We talked about it incessantly. What's going to happen? I think we have shorted Papanastis because he's been terrific. 10 out of 13. He's second in the SEC in percentage made. And I think the leader's the A&M kicker, who's 10 of 12. Papanastis is 10 of 13. He's even kicked a couple of 44s, 46s. He's been terrific for Alabama, and what a weapon he could be as you get close down and getting into playoffs, getting his confidence up.
Well, yeah, I think you have to give it to him. He's if you look at it, he's one of the 6 games in, he's one of the players of the year. Because there was a lot of doubts about him. Scott, you mentioned he's hit several 40-plus yard kicks, which was really his range was supposed to be kind of ending right at 40 yards. So he's done a nice job. That was a clutch kick the other night. I mean, think about the pressure he had on him. It was a 44-yard kick. It was in that situation when it was 24 to whatever it was, 12, and he nailed it. I mean, it would have been good from 48 to 50. So you have to be really, really pleased with what he's done so far. He just has to continue to kick well. Now, J.K. Scott has struggled a little bit as the punter, which is, he had a great, obviously we know about his first 3 years. He was an All-American type punter, has been. But, had a great fall camp. And then now he's struggled a little bit, had a kick block the other night. He shanked one. He shanked a couple this year. But you know what? J.K. Scott's a very, very talented guy, and you know that he's going to break out of the slump.
We come full circle to end with recruiting again. We know that as with December sitting there, that it's going to be even more critical middle of the year to the end. Do you see it ramp up intensity-wise, Arkansas, Tennessee games, LSU, and those kind of things? These are critical SEC weeks coming up.
Yeah, no question about it. I mean, you're going to see more visitors this weekend. The next weekend when Tennessee, you'll even see more, I think. And then there's an off week, and then you've got LSU coming in. So those 3 weekends will be really big. Yep, it's cranking up. Middle of December, get ready because it'll be here before you know it. And, if Alabama's in the SEC championship game like they usually are, then how difficult does that make? You're preparing for the SEC championship, and then all of a sudden you've got signing day coming up, and if you win the SEC championship, you're preparing for your next step, which you know what that is, the playoffs. So it's a really busy time.
All right, nobody knows recruiting better than Rodney or Tider Insider. Go to TiderInsider.com. We're really ramping up the coverage there with podcasts and videos. The recruiting information's always been spectacular. Do it. It's $48 a year is all it is. That's 2 or 3 lunches. Throw it on there and get it done. You'll get all the recruiting information, even more critical this year because we got 2 signing periods in football. Don't forget that. So it's going to be wall-to-wall action until February, and then you got a very ranked basketball team coming up as well. Don't forget about Tide and Tiger, the YouTube channel, as well as here on podbean.com for the Tide and Tiger podcast involving myself and Rodney Orr. For Rodney, Scott Griffin saying so long. We'll talk to you again after the game and give you what we thought happened in that game right here on Tider Insider and Tide and Tiger on Podbean.